But yeah,
So my
no,
next
she's
question is, what is Kara doing in like downtime where one would be watching television?
no, we're still watching television. We're watching something
Oh,
all
so
the
Kara's
time.
just not paying attention.
No, no, she just won't watch those types of like for like if I'm like, oh, I wanna show you, for example, like one of my favorite shows is Parenthood. Like I love Parenthood. It's not really the kind of show that Kara would like anyways, because I don't know, she doesn't like shows that are like about characters, if that makes sense. Like,
Like every show.
well, I guess she likes basically here's what Kara likes. She likes dark. If it's something that's gonna be dark, depressing, somebody's dying, somebody's getting killed, true crime,
Sounds like she just
documentaries.
needs to be a Chicago Sky fan, right? Well, there you go.
Going up.
Just when I thought I was not going to get a cold open, I walked right into one. It took a few minutes, but I got it. It's the freaking weekend, baby. And that means that it's time for more playoff basketball. And that means it's time for more yapping. Your favorite flagrant girlies. That's right, we are back. Another episode of the Flagrant Femmes, as always. I am your co-host, Kenzie. I'm buzzing. I'm elated. I'm having the time of my life. It's only been one round of playoff basketball. There's been a little bit of controversy mixed in there. We'll get to all of that. Alongside me is your other co-host, Maddie, the queen of 30,000 or more, possibly 40,000 likes on her tweets on Twitter. I know you kind of went through it this week. Both of your teams are officially out, but I know you can't help but be involved in the drama of it. How are you holding up?
Well, it's been a time. I took a brief hiatus from tweeting and came back and then immediately decided to go back to just stirring up all kinds of trouble. I swear to God, I do not intend, like I do not think in my head like I this tweet it when I post when I hit send on this like, oh, this is going to cause a kerfuffle. Like I had no idea. Literally
That is all you do.
Kenzie, I know, but I don't think that it's go I can't explain it, but like in my head, Twitter, like I have never had followers like this in my life on any social media platform. So in my head, Twitter will always just be like an empty void where like my 12 friends are going to see it and laugh at it. And like everyone knows like who I am and like what I am about. And I'm just now learning that I like can't tweet like that anymore because people it reaches people who don't know me and they think that I mean something completely different. Um but also on the other hand, I do love to argue.
That is
Um
the flaw. That you
so
love to argue. And you win those arguments, which just means it's fun for you. It's not fun for everybody else, but
right,
it's fun to watch.
but it is fun for me. And I feel a duty in a sense to like, you know, someone has to put these people in their place sometimes. And I'm willing to take on that responsibility and that challenge and do that.
I was using the metaphor earlier before we started recording about how when Maddie tweets, it's like a fisherman throwing a net, casting a net into the ocean and catching all kinds of fish, except Maddie's tweets catch the worst imaginable men you could dream up. If you had a lab and came up with the worst people on earth, and they're mostly men. Sometimes there's a woman in there that wants to get into it, but Maddie will round them up into her mention It is a bloodbath. It is. It is a nightmare. And speaking of just the basketball, we'll dive into all those first round games in a minute. But I did kind of call it with Seattle and Vegas. Really felt like Jewel Lloyd was dealing with something, some kind of lingering injury, lingering something. She was definitely not herself. Lack of a volume scorer, a threat from three really hurt them. I think they're set up for success long term, so hopefully one of your teams will figure it out. Your other team in the Merc, they should be proud. I think they should be pretty proud. If it wasn't for Nafisa Collier and Herculean effort in both of those games and kind of getting hoed by the refs, honestly, Phoenix looks like they could have won that series.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. That's the second time that my Phoenix basketball team has been swept by Minnesota in the past 6
Ooh.
months. So honestly, I feel like that's like partly why I was so checked out of that series. I was just like, I cannot do this again emotionally. Um, but I do just have to say before we even get there, I do have to rant for a second because I had some notes that I took when I was watching the games because I wasn't on Twitter, so I couldn't live tweet them. And there was no WNBA countdown prior to the games, prior to the early game. And so they were literally showing us Sam Darnold highlights. I love what he's doing. I love that that man's, rejuvenated his career or whatever. But I was already going into the game in a bad mood. We're kicking off the WNBA fucking playoffs with Sam Darnold highlights. I was already pissed off as it was. Then there are clock issues. The first game and the second game, the Fever game was way worse. There was like major clock issues. There was some kind of issue with the actual whistle. But uh, I was so infuriated as a women's sports fan. I feel like I'm just literally so exhausted of seeing these athletes have to constantly deal with this bullshit. I understand that these clock issues happen. It's not just women's sports, but like it's not about this one incident. It's literally all the time. It's something like it's just unserious and unprofessional. And then it's like it reflects bad on the league. And then people are like, oh, the WNBA is not serious. Like this isn't a serious league. Look at them. They have all these issues. It's like, yeah, it's a never ending cycle. Like it's a feedback loop. And so that's just it just pissed me off. And I just have to mention it because ESPN.
You don't really have much of an excuse because you're already in an NBA arena. Like this game is already in an NBA barn, so like you should have the cameras, the production crew, the production facility, everything should be already set up for you because it's not like there aren't games, the NBA games on ESPN. Like it's not the first time they've ever shot a game in that building. So, and that's the thing that sucks is there's extra pressure on women, on women's sports, on the WNBA to be perfect because the first time that something like that happens, it's the talk of the town. Everybody who is a casual is going to bash the WNBA because it's unprofessional or it looks stupid or whatever. Like that's the pressure that this league is under. So, Kathy, Kathy, you have a bad future with this podcast. I hate to say it, but you need to clean it up. You need to do something to clean something up. There's a lot of aisles that need clean up right now. The intercom's going crazy in the grocery store, and you're not answering the call. So figure it out, fix it. We've got plenty to catch up on in terms of our first round winners. We've got to preview the semifinals. We have a lot of discourse to dive into. A lot of shit happened this week, and some of it was not good. So for fans of yapping, this is absolutely going to be an episode for you. It is going to be a long one, so get the Dejanay Carrington seatbelt out and buckle up because we're getting started. All right, so we had a lot of drama getting to the playoffs, but the first round was 4 sweeps. Everybody won 2-0. But there was some compelling basketball, especially in Minneapolis and Connecticut. There were 2 pretty hotly contested games. We'll get started right off the jump with my personal favorite series. That was the Fever and the Sun. I said on the last episode that Connecticut needed to get their bigs comfortable. They did that. They had 38 and 53 in both games, respectively. Maddie, you said that Connecticut needed to sustain consistent offense to be successful in the series, and they did. So did the series play out how you envisioned it would?
I mean, honestly, I feel like the series has been tainted for me in my mind a little bit just because of all of the unfortunate media coverage around it. But in terms of actual basketball, yes, I think it played out almost exactly like what we talked about. It was kind of, they were close games, they were hard fought, and ultimately the veteran team and the veteran players just kind of they were able to finish things out when it counted, and that's how they were able to win the games. But I think, you know, Indiana did a great job keeping it close, and Connecticut was just in every moment. It was like, that the shot that they needed to make, they made. And that's just kind of how these series tend to go when it's like a veteran team versus a young team that hasn't it's making the playoffs for the first time in 8 years.
I mean, you say they were just making the shots when they needed to make the shots, and I keep thinking back to this Marina Mabry trade and watching the series. That kind of makes me feel like maybe I have the confidence now that Connecticut can actually go all the way. Do I think they will? I don't know. That's to be seen. But what I do know is that Marina Mabry was the moment in both games at some point. Marina Mabry made herself the moment. Felt like every time Kelsey Mitchell or Caitlin Clark hit a big shot, and it dampened momentum or started momentum. Like Marina Mabry was coming off a screen on the next possession and hitting a three. Like it was like clockwork. It was incredible. And she became especially important when Ty Harris went down and ultimately missed game 2. So outside of just being generally young and inexperienced when it comes to the playoffs, I really think Indiana's problem was the forwards. Aaliyah Boston, she did her job offensively. She shot over 50% from the field. She had double-digit points in both games. But I mean, you hate to be a box score watcher, but the second you kind of start scanning down that box score, you see a lot of bad plus minuses. You see some pretty major lack of scoring. Melissa Smith, she played a combined 13 minutes, didn't have a single point in the series. Timmy Fagbenle, outside of her in game 2, you mostly stayed out of foul trouble. So you got good minutes from Dantas offensively in game 1. Defensively, she played great in game 2. Do you feel like the big play was kind of the undoing for Indiana? Like, was it just the bigs were just not showing up, or are you just looking at it was the guard speed and they just didn't do enough and lost out to the size from Connecticut?
So I think ultimately it was kind of ironic, and Connecticut sort of flipped the script with the three-point shooting. I think I looked at the stats. Caitlin Clark was 5 for 25 from 3 in the series. Lexi Hull was 1 for 7. She'd been shooting 60% over her last 15 games the regular season, which, I mean, we all knew, 60% is pretty crazy. But I mean, she'd been shooting lights out. So, and Steph White had DeWanna Bonner covering Caitlin Clark, and Dejanay had been guarding her for pretty much the entire for the entire regular season. So I think, that kind of threw things off from the jump, and then they were throwing different bodies at her and different coverages her way. So I think that definitely affected things. And we've seen all season that sort of when Caitlin's three-point shooting was off, other players' three-point shooting tended to also be off. So I think it was kind of like, that's when that can tend to be true, because like sometimes, if the ball movement is not there, then that can affect the whole team. But yeah, I think Indy was third in the regular season in three-point shooting. They shot almost 36%. And then in these 2 games, they were 14 of 58 for 24%. So I think that's kind of where it is. And then, like you said, someone like Mabry, who was 8 for 22 in the series, she had more threes herself than Caitlin and Lexi combined. And so, I think that was a big part of it. In game 1, I cannot forget to say that Alyssa Thomas had a triple double in game 1. She's a beast. So yeah, I think, it was just all of it. It was DeWanna Bonner being DeWanna Bonner. It was Alyssa Thomas being Alyssa Thomas, and it was Mabry's shooting, Dejanay's defense, and it was just all of it.
I was maybe like 5 minutes late coming downstairs to the start of game 1, and when I walk downstairs and I look up and I see DeWanna Bonner playing defense on Caitlin Clark, I was like, oh, it must have been like a switch. It must have been like a switch off, and it happened again and again and again. And she was doing a fantastic job. I was just like, this. I don't know if it was just some kind of mind game from Steph White, but it worked. I don't know
Straight
what it
clamps.
was, but it worked.
It was just the length.
Yeah, I mean it's hard enough to shoot threes. I know who Caitlin Clark is, and I know what she does, but it's hard enough in this league. But when you got DeWanna Bonner jumping at you, it's probably just a little bit more nerve-wracking than it is anybody else. So I really do think in the end, like the Sun team, just they looked the part. They were far more experienced as a roster in terms of playoffs, and they looked the part. I think there's holes in Indiana's roster that needs to be fixed, but you can attribute a lot of the series to the fact that the Sun have been there before, and they looked like it. They looked like they had been there before, and the Fever looked like the scrappy young team that just caved into the pressure and caved into the physicality of a series like this. And I know it's a tough feeling for them to exit early, but just making the playoffs, pretty solid accomplishment. I think it's great experience. I think you can move forward like knowing you kind of got it out of the way. Like, there's maybe a little bit less pressure on you next time around. Before we move on to the next series, I do feel like we should each pick a favorite moment because there was some seriously high quality shithousery going on in this series. I think my personal favorite moment was when Caitlin knocked Marina into the bench on a shot attempt, and the way Marina Mabry stood up and had the most insane look in her eyes sent me to the moon. I was cackling out loud because her eyes were like the size of pizzas. They were crossed. She was lasering. Like it was bad. She popped up really fast. I thought we were about to have a problem, but somehow it never escalated above what it was. Maddie, what about you?
That moment was that moment will be seared in my mind forever. That was so iconic for me because you could tell at first it was one of those things where at first she couldn't tell if it was an accident because like that happens where people get shoved accidentally out of bounds or whatever. And then as soon as she realized it was in fact just an actual shove, as Caitlin's just like walking away, um, the change in her expression is what she was just immediately ready to go after her. But I'm gonna say my favorite moment was when Dejanay had that massive block, and you could see on the camera very clearly. She said, "Give me that shit," and then the camera panned to Marina, and she was saying, "Oh my god!" Like you could. She was like, "Oh my god." Those two are my favorite sports plotline in years. It's enemies to lovers basketball edition. Like what
Like the unlikeliest of best
this is
friends.
the
You can
it's
find
beautiful.
highlights of these
This
two.
is they have literally been going at it for years. This season, there's literally a highlight this season of Marina telling Dejanay, "Shut the fuck up." And now they're on the same team and riding for each other. And that is just what this league is all about, honestly.
That is what it's all about. And you're really missing out. This is a reality show. We said it last episode, but I'm serious. This is a reality show. It's good fun. And you're missing out if you're not watching. So, your personal favorite series was that between the Seattle Storm and the Las Vegas Aces. That one, again, we mentioned, ended in a 2-0 sweep in favor of Vegas. Basketball wise, it had some pretty compelling action for a few moments, but in keeping with the theme from their meeting a few weeks ago, Vegas ultimately controlled the second half of both games, put them away fairly comfortably. Game two was a little bit more sketchy than game one, but Maddie, I asked you in the moment, almost after it happened, how horrendous is it as a Storm fan? You look at the game clock. There's like less than 3 minutes, and you look at the shot clock, and it's like already down to 15 seconds. And then you look down, and there's Chelsea Gray ISOing some poor guard. Unfortunately, it was Gabby Williams most of these games, but just sizing up a guard and just burying a jumper on every possession. Can you just describe that feeling?
Well, I was definitely having flashbacks for sure. Flashbacks to 2022. And I had the same feeling that I had then, which is this very It's a very odd sensation that I can't explain because I don't feel it in almost any other, like the WNBA is so unique in this way for me because I don't really have like the WNBA. I love players on every team, and it's not really the same way for me in most other sports. So on the one hand, it's like half my body is screaming and I'm on my knees begging, please, God, please let this not go in, please, God. And then the other half of me is just like, oh my God, that is Chelsea Gray, a Hall of Fame point guard. She is so incredible. Look at her passes. Look at her jumper. Oh my God. Even with a broken foot, even with, it's just like inevitable. So it's like, I don't know, it's hard to explain, but it's like there's no one I would rather lose to in a way. You know what I mean? It's like if we're gonna go out to a shot like that, to a player like that. There are worse ways to go. That's all I'm gonna say. There are
Sure.
worse ways to go. I'm not saying it didn't hurt. It absolutely did hurt. Seeing those exit interviews, seeing my players cry, that hurt my heart. But also we won 11 games last year. So, you know what I mean? In the grand scheme of things, I'm happy. When we get pow pow,
Then
when we
there's
get
going to be trouble.
shooting,
Then Seattle
it's
set
gonna
up.
be, I don't know what to tell you. We
Which
got a
is
new
right.
facility. So,
Unlike Chicago, figure it out, Chicago. I feel like at this point, Chelsea Gray just has to be living in the nightmares of Storm fans because ever since she came to Vegas, I don't know what happened or what caused this, but she has personally decided to torture Seattle and just Seattle for some reason in the final moments of playoff games. And I was literally, I tweeted it. No one interacted with it because I know a lot of people were upset because a lot of my mutual were Storm fans. But I was yelling at the top of my lungs, she's a nightmare. It's like, she's a nightmare! Just she's trying to line up the shot and I'm screaming at, probably can hear me. But as we mentioned before the series started, I think a lot of my feelings kind of hinged on the status of Jewel Lloyd and Ezzy Magbagor. I think the series kind of hinged on those two. And I think that pretty much was the tail of the tape in the end. You had a supposedly healthy Jewel Lloyd in both games. Shooting just wasn't falling. Definitely had plenty of looks, but it just wasn't going in. Ezzy's presence was certainly missed in game one. I feel like she was a huge boost in game two. She was hitting some big shots to kind of keep it close when the Aces were pulling away a little bit with the momentum. I mean, you kind of touched on it, but do you feel like Seattle has the right group and Vegas just hit that back-to-back playoff stride, or do you think there's some holes in your squad that you'd like to see filled next year?
I mean, I really think just the biggest issue is the 3-point shooting and the big depth. I think what hurt us the most with Ezzy being out was NECA was tasked with guarding Asia a lot of the time and trying to guard Asia, the best player in the world, on top of also like having offensive production essentially like for her and Ezzy, like trying to make up for Ezzy's production on that end. So I think you could just see like that usage level and that like amount to ask from NECA at this stage of her career as well. Like she was worn ragged by the end. So I think that, and then I don't know what was going on with Jewel. I'm still convinced she had some kind of injury. I don't know, but whatever. So at the end of the day, I feel like I really like the core group that we have. I feel like it's still a good rebound season from last year. And I feel like now, we have the capability to hopefully pursue some free agents potentially and to retain hopefully Gabby Williams if the WNBA doesn't whatever. But yeah, I mean honestly I feel like it's like the same, the main core group is there, but we just need some additional pieces to kind of round out the roster. We're not quite at that top tier level where these final four teams that are left are at with their rosters. So we need to get that figured out. And no offense, Mercedes Russell, I love you, but
Every
We
time
might
Mercedes
need
Russell
some
got,
additional big depth, is all I'm saying.
yeah, the Aces. I was literally about to talk about the team defense, but I feel like a theme in that game or the last meeting before the playoff series, the fourth quarter, the Aces like started forcing Mercedes Russell into taking all of the shots, and it worked. She was not hitting them. She hit a couple in the playoffs, but again, they were kind of forcing the issue with Mercedes Russell at times, especially without Ezzy. And it's a lot of pressure to
And
hit
I
a
was so
lot of
proud of her.
shots
It's
like
not her
that.
fault. Like it's not anything about her. It's not. It's simply just like,
Well, it's hilarious that Vegas's team defense was so good in game one because all we did, I mean, I know I definitely did, was just bag on the team defense. Before the series started, I was calling them traffic cones, traffic barrels, like any stationary object, like that's who the Aces were, and then they come out and give up 2 points in the fourth quarter in game one, which was incredible to witness because I had no
don't
idea it
fucking
happened.
remind me, God.
I had no idea it happened. I got on Twitter and I was like, wait, were those free throws the only points they had? I don't know. It was incredible to see the team defense and to see it start clicking. I mean, I feel like Seattle, though, long term, they've got the roster to go all the way. Like you said, they need that 3-point shooting. They just need a little bit extra, just a little bit more depth, just retool it, and I think you can go all the way. I mean, injuries had a lot to do with their story this year, but you also ran into a scorching hot Aces team. Played both games on the road. The hill was already super tall to climb to begin with. So, as for the Aces' performance offensively, I think you saw a concerning amount of balance. If you are not an Aces fan, you had everyday performances from the MVP and Asia Wilson. Chelsea Gray went right back to playoff form. Tip Hayes gave you very, very good and balanced scoring and became another threat in crunch time. In game one, she was hitting some big shots when the game got close, and game two was doing the same thing, which takes a little bit of the pressure off of Chelsea Gray. Um, Jackie and Kelsey, they each kind of had a little bit of a skid game, but they both played well in at least one. Um, Maddie, do you think the Aces look like a team that can win a third straight title, or do you feel like there's one more gear that they need to hit in order to get past New York?
Well, I just want to say on the record that there has never been a time this season when I did not think that the Aces could win a title. I just have to say that. I have always maintained that they had a chance. And I think from the moment that ball tipped in game one, you could see the Aces shifted. There are not a lot of teams in sports that have this capability, this almost chameleon like ability to just shift mindsets and hone everything the second that the lights are brightest when the playoffs start. And I think the Aces have just shown that they are that team. And honestly, what it goes back to for me is Asia Wilson, because at the end of the day, I think we know at this point what we're going to get from her every single night. She is the same incredible MVP, Defensive Player of the Year caliber player 24/7, 365. But I think what you see in the playoffs and in these big moments is all of her teammates from Kelsey Plum to Alicia Clark, those players start stepping up and playing to their full potential. So it's just like all cylinders are firing at once. It's just like I can't explain it, but you can just see it's like all of a sudden they're the same well-oiled machine that it's just I literally cannot explain it. That's just how it is. And some teams just have it. Like we've seen this. We've seen this. The Patriots, like you know what I mean? Like
Yeah, I mean, I definitely am not somebody that thought they were going to win another title. It was completely checked out for me by June, and you're well aware of that. And I've said it on here, so I will eat my crow. They definitely look a little bit scary and a little bit back with it. Like you said, everybody was kind of doing their jobs. I mean, even Kia Stokes, who I've been pretty hard on over the course of this year, was looks remarkably improved. Playing defense at times in both of these games, was actually hunting rebounds a little bit, just made a couple buckets. Like, I mean, I told you we were DMing during the game in game 2. She needed to be out there. There was a point where I was like, Kia Stokes needs to be out here. That is not something I have said one time this entire season. So credit to Kia Stokes for locking in. The team defense got a little bit tired, started slacking, and Kia Stokes picked it up. Kia Stokes is the one picking it up. Alicia Clark, like you said, also locked in pretty well. I think she
Seattle
benefited
killer
from aces.
trader.
She benefited from being able to go small. The aces went small in game 1 without Ezzy Magdagor, so that was helpful for her in game 1. But the size with Ezzy kind of exposed Vegas in game 2 a little bit, I think. So Kia's renaissance was pretty needed, I think. But Becky, like, I need you to get real and stop pulling Meg after 5 minutes because she provides valuable size. I went and looked at the box scores. Megan Gustafson plays like 5 minutes and gets pulled and doesn't go past 5 minutes. I realized Kia was playing well, but like, you can put them both out there. You can put Asia, you can take Asia out. You can put Meg in. You can take AC out. You can put Meg in. Like, she gives you a scoring threat from 3. She plays hustle defense. She gets beat at times. She's a white girl. There's a little bit of cement in those feet, but she tries and she goes for rebounds, and that's what we need. That's what we need is hustle and heart, and Meg's got it. So Becky, just maybe give her like 10. Like, just think about 10. Let's push
And
another 8 to 10
Sid.
range. I could talk about that for hours. I'm not gonna, because I go down those roads all the time with Kate. Poor Kate gets her ear talked off about Sid Colson needing to be in the lineup more. So I'll save that, but just play your bench. That's all we're saying. Just play your
Please.
bench. Okay, so on from one of your teams crashing out to the next one. We saw Phoenix push Minnesota to the brink in both games. They ultimately also fell in the 2-0 sweep. You could probably argue that this may have been the best series had the refs not been absolutely hoeing the Mercury the entire time. The entire time, both games, especially towards the end of game 1, where you really felt like Phoenix was about to take this thing over, and the refs just boop, boop, boop. The Lynx had a plus 20 foul advantage. 2 games! In 2 games, they had 20 more fouls in their favor. When I was doing research for the Aces and Liberty series, they have a plus 20 the whole season. Over the course of like 3 or 4 games, they are plus 20. This happened in 2 games. So like, that is a league whistle. That's a league mandated whistle. That is absolutely ridiculous. Real talk though, I think toe to toe, both squad starters played pretty good basketball overall. I think it was just Nafisa Collier, just immaculate back-to-back performances that swung the series to the Lynx. And I think it's safe to say, Maddie, that he is taking that MVP loss and just taking it out on folks.
Yeah, I gotta be honest, this series was hard for me to watch at times, not just because of the horrific officiating, and it was horrific, or the fact that it was most likely Diana Taurasi's last playoff series. She was 7 for 18 from 3, by the way. So, anyways, or the fact that Tosh Cloud's bomb game 1 performance, she had 33 points, 6 rebounds, 10 assists, will be forgotten to history just because we lost. But because the Mercury played some of the most piss poor defense I have seen since the 2020 Phoenix Suns. Derogatory. So I was just like, that's what is just like to see at the very end in these close games where it's like, okay, yes, we are getting hoed by the refs. Yes, whatever. Stop letting it be a layup line at the very end. Like, it's like we're getting blown by on these stupid ass.
I need to get you like into a yoga class or something.
That's all. That's all I have to say about that.
You probably don't want to be compared to the Phoenix Suns, because when the Phoenix Suns come up, it's usually not a good thing. Sadly for you, it's usually some sort of derogatory reference. In terms of Nafisa Collier, though, like, I'm sorry, unfortunately for you, like Asia had that same fire lit under her last year, and it turned into a year-long MVP campaign. So obviously, you got to give Nafisa her flowers, but in the end, 2 games are 2 games, and a season is a season. So it is what it is. It's already over. Let's stop worrying about it. Although she had a couple of incredible performances, I think you can look at the depth again. You can look at the Lynx bench and see how the balance is just it's scary. I think it's terrifying for opponents. I mean, you had a starting five that they were contributing pretty heavily in scoring in both games. I'm pretty sure in game two they had all double-digit scoring. And then in both games, Maisha Hyde Allen and Natisha Hiedeman came off the bench and provided solid minutes on both ends of the floor in their own way. So after seeing Minnesota take a few heavy punches, they responded incredibly well. Is your confidence in them going all the way? Is it growing?
I mean, I can't lie, that team is scary as hell. It feels like they can just hit you with like waves of good players. So I know Connecticut definitely is not going to take them lightly, that's for sure. I mean, that is a damn good team, and they have just been so unbelievably hot since the Olympic break. They just have like seemed like very together all season, and um I don't know. It's scary. It's concerning. And they have Cheryl Reeve at the helm. Like, no, she takes no shit. She's won a lot of fucking championships. So, I mean, I'm scared. I'm scared of them. I'll raise my hand and admit it. I'm scared of the Minnesota Lynx. I wouldn't want to
Yeah,
play
they
them
are.
right now.
They
I didn't. I mean, my
definitely.
team just lost to them, so clearly I didn't want to
Yep.
play them.
Yeah.
It wasn't fun.
This is a team I think we sat around and said, well, and they just have shut us up in every step of the way to the end of the season. They've shut us up and showed out. So watch out for the Lynx. As for Phoenix, I think you certainly saw flashes of the hot start that they had back in May. We made 14 threes in game one. That was something I had to sit through when they played the Aces. They were just making every single three. You had Tarasi and Copper and Cloud going off in the series, and you played decent enough defense, I think, to give yourself a chance to win. That was bad at times towards the end of the game, but I think, game two, it just, wasn't really the same story in terms of your guards showing out, but, the threes didn't fall. You got a good game from BG. You got a good game from Natasha Mack. You got respectable games from your guards, but what do you think's missing? What is it that Phoenix is missing to put all of this together? Because I know it's the easy thing to point and laugh at girl dad. Do you think it was the coaching, or was it just the late season injuries? Like, what's your take on what is going on with the Mercury and what they can do to fix it?
Well, his bum ass timeouts and challenges definitely didn't help. I'll tell you that much. But I'm going to be honest, I just don't think the roster was quite up to par. And if you look, when I was looking at the data just like on offensive and defensive ratings and things like that, like the Mercury were a fringe playoff team at best. Like, so I think, it kind of fit where they were. And so I wasn't disappointed in that fact. I mean, I love Celeste Taylor. We already talked about she broke her nose, and she's a warrior, and I love that. But when you're getting rotation minutes from a second round pick rookie in the WNBA playoffs, that's most likely not going to be a recipe for success, like just historically. So, with all due respect, because I love all the players, not you, Sophie, I I think the players played their asses off, and I think under the circumstances, like, it was a good result. But I just think this team, especially without Beck Allen, but even when we had Beck Allen, it's not like we were ever really contenders. Like, I got hosed because I tweeted one time like a list of the 6 teams that were. I said they were trying to be contenders. By the way, just to be clear. But I mean, it was clear that they were never up. They were never up to par. They were never up to stuff on that. Too many aging vets. No offense. And not enough continuity and health to hold it all together. And Girl Dad was just the icing on a cake that already was, you know, Walmart brand.
Yeah,
So
I don't know. I don't exactly know what to make of it. I think you make a lot of really good points. There's a lot of things that you could look at fixing. Um, I kind of feel similarly to them as I feel about Seattle. I think you can use another big piece inside, a consistent and confident big. Um, I like Becky Allen and I like Sophie Cunningham's rotation. I feel like that was really working earlier in the year. Obviously, we don't know what's going on with DT, so that could open up a vital guard role for someone. Fortunately for Phoenix, regardless of what happens with who's staying and who's going, it's a good offseason to be a buyer, and Phoenix will be buyers. So they definitely have good timing with some potential spots opening up, some good players available. They got a new facility opening, so I'd like to see Girl Dad have a great offseason and take a step forward in 2025. Otherwise, it is not going to be pretty because Maddie is chomping at the bit to get Girl Dad. If there is an attempt if he can catch a stray, Maddie will figure it out. He will catch a stray from Maddie. So, New York and Atlanta. I am not gonna lie, I checked completely out of the series. I did not watch a single minute of Atlanta and New York. To be fair, their games did run up against my get ready time before the Aces game, so I was kind of off and doing other things and had that excuse. I wasn't expecting much of a series. I think I was right. I think it got a little bit close in game two, but New York dominated, basically wire to wire. I think it was the first quarter of game two. Atlanta had cracked open a lead and then just blew it over the course of the game. Unfortunately for Atlanta, Brittany Ionescu shooting skid, that came to an end. Stewie was Stewie. Stewie's going to show up and give you something every night. Leonie Fibic, her insertion into the lineup over Courtney Vandersloot paid pretty huge dividends for New York. Do you think the Liberty were the most dominant team as a whole in the first round?
that is a great question. I mean, yeah, probably. Yeah, probably you have to give that to them. Um, I have such a Liberty bias, so I feel like my instinct is just to not give them credit. But yeah, I think they were definitely the most dominant in the first round. Um, Game one, yeah, Leonie Fibic. I was surprised on the broadcast when they said actually that that starting lineup with Leonie Fibic in it actually had the best defensive rating of any 5-player lineup in the league. I was expecting a great offensive rating from that lineup, but the defensive rating I think actually did surprise me a little bit. But you could see it. I mean, it was a nightmare for Atlanta out there. They were in hell with that lineup on the court. So, yeah, I mean, Leonie was huge, 4 for 4 from 3 in that first game, the Leonie Fibic game as everyone was expecting. Um, and yeah, honestly, it just seemed like one of those series where the Liberty were basically just better in every in every area of the game for the most part. I do have to mention also that we got Jalen Sherrod minutes in the playoffs, which made my heart very happy. And she even had her first playoff steal. So legendary. Love that for her. Go Buffs. Um, and yeah, I mean, they just crushed. I mean, it was boring series for anybody who wasn't a New York Liberty fan, honestly. I think because it was just like one of those where it's just like, yeah, they just kind of got trounced.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about Minnesota and how strong they are. I really feel like New York has potentially the strongest starting group in the league. And when they play at full tilt, that makes them the favorite in my eyes. Like, when you look down the depth chart a little, there's some problems, and they were even showing in this series on both ends of the floor. I realize it was Atlanta. It's a pretty top heavy team themselves, but the Liberty bench combined for 12 points in both games. They finished minus 28 across both games. So this is kind of something that's kind of reared its head in the regular season for them. They had similar struggles against Minnesota, who has probably the best depth in the league. Um, And it's more important now because, with Hibic slotting in for Courtney Vandersloot, that's taking good bench production, putting it in the starting lineup for somebody that's not really producing at all. So do you feel like their starting five is strong enough to offset that depth? I mean, given that they've struggled with Minnesota, but now you have Tip Hayes in Vegas, who's coming out and putting up double-digit points every night. You have Alicia Clark, who's starting to put up 7 to 10 per night. Now if you look at Connecticut, you've got Marina Mabry or Tyasha Harris. Whoever comes off the bench in that situation is producing at an extremely high level for Connecticut. So is the starting five strong enough to offset the depth problem?
I think it's hard for me to say, and I think it's all going to depend, honestly, on the health and we're just going to have to kind of see like where those players, those bench players are for the Liberty, because I know Benija and Niara Sabali have been nursing injuries. Sloot has not been producing at the same level like you mentioned. So I think while on paper their depth definitely has an advantage, we saw how it may not actually play out like that when push comes to shove. So I think, on the other hand, they might not have played their best basketball yet. It might be that there is like a little bit of additional time between there was like, a little bit of a break between that series and this series. So maybe they're healthier going into the semifinals. I I don't know. So we saw, I feel like it's just the other aspect that I'm looking at is like I feel like Vegas is a test for them just given the history and the situation, just losing that to them in the finals and the fact that they have kind of owned them this regular season. I feel like the pressure is on them to make the finals and to win the finals. They are the number one seed, so I wonder, like, does that play a role in it at all?
Yeah, I mean, you know me, I am not confident in Vegas at all because that's just my nature. I am constantly afraid of losing and constantly not confident. Especially given how, I mean, like you said, they swept us, they dominated us, and they did it at various points of the season, healthy and not healthy. So I think depth could be an Achilles heel for them, though. That being said, you have starting five good enough to offset it. I think, especially if Game Two Sabrina Ionescu is going to exist. Um, I do wonder, like you said, about that pressure getting to them. Um, I think the title pressure is squarely on the New York Liberty. I think you were the most dominant team over the course of the season. You carry the top seed burden that exists for the number one seed. And we'll get into the semifinal previews momentarily, but my Vegas circles, like on my timeline, like people are feeling a little bit relaxed. I think at this point last year, the tension was starting to build up a little bit. It wasn't fully pumping until we got to New York, but it was tense. It was getting tense even with Dallas. So the vibes right now, relaxed. The vibes are chill. You obviously want a three-peat, but I think just this year, Vegas has been through so much drama. They've been through injuries. Like I kind of think you feel a little bit happy with where you are, seating wise and getting to the semifinals, all things given. Obviously the players are going to want to win a championship. They're not fans. They're about it. They want it. But for Aces fans, I feel like, we kind of need to just be happy with where we are. Unfortunately for New York, they're facing a similar pressure as Connecticut. You have a team that's hasn't broken through, that's been playing pretty well, and you're expected to do so given your roster. So, like I said, I think that pressure is squarely on New York. They can deny it, but I think it's squarely on them. All right, so that's that for the playoff or the first round of the playoff recap. We have a quick little interlude here. This sounds like a thesis paper, like the title of a paper. I titled it "The Media Racism and League Response." I don't know why it came out sounding so academic, but it did. As we kind of touched on earlier, we've had quite the few days in the wake of the Racism Bowl between Indiana and Connecticut. I called it that purely as a joke. It was a simple jeer at the horrific behaviors that the Fever fans have exhibited throughout the season. Unfortunately, that boiled completely over. All of the water spilling out of the pot. I don't exactly know where to start, other than to begin with the league being entirely at blame for getting us to the point we've reached. Like, okay, so first things first, we have a short segment here from SportsCenter. This was aired on Wednesday night, right after the playoff games ended. You'll hear from Alyssa Thomas, who had some comments in the postgame press conference. They'll read the statement from the league, the actual statement from the WNBA, and then a little bit of a monologue from ESPN's Andrea Carter.
Honestly, it's been a lot of nonsense. I think in my 11-year career, I've never experienced the racial comments from the Indiana Fever fan base. We had her face on a serious matter that happened in this world, and it's unacceptable, honestly. There's no place for it, and we've been professional throughout the whole entire thing, but I've never been called the things that I've been called on social media, and there's no place for it. Basketball is headed in a great direction, but nah, we don't want fans that are going to degrade us and call us racial names. I mean, we already see what's happening in the world and what we have to deal with in that aspect. And, we come to play basketball for our job and it's fun, but we don't want to go to work every day and have social media blown up over things like that. It's uncalled for, and something needs to be done, whether it's, them checking their fans or this league checking. There's no time for it anymore.
Now, in response to those comments, the WNBA issued a statement saying the WNBA is a competitive league with some of the most elite athletes in the world. While we welcome a growing fan base, the WNBA will not tolerate racist, derogatory, or threatening comments made about players, teams, and anyone affiliated with the league. League security is actively monitoring threat-related activity and will work directly with teams and arenas to take appropriate measures to include involving law enforcement as necessary. Ray, what's your reaction to that news?
Well, my first reaction immediately is it's sad. It's sad that on an evening when we've had great performances from the teams that won, from the teams that lost, we've had great individual performances. We've got two teams advancing to the semifinals. And this is the topic that we have to end on. And what stood out to me about what Alyssa Thomas said was basketball is heading in a great direction, and then there's a pause. Because, again, it's heartbreaking that in a time where our league is so exciting, the excitement around the league is at its highest, but the racial slurs and the derogatory comments and the online bullying are also at their worst. And that's the two things that we don't want. We want all the excitement, but it should be based on basketball only. This is a league that has thrived off of women that have competitive spirit and that want to play the game and that love playing the game. But it's also a league that's thrived off of women that truly take pride in inclusivity and diversity and welcoming others and protecting marginalized groups. And so there's no room for racism. There's no room for bullying. There's no room for derogatory comments. We love this sport. These players love to play this sport, and everything should be based about the game. Everything should be based about the game of basketball, because that's what these women love, and that's what all of these women are here for. So the fans that are giving those racial slurs, that are giving those derogatory comments, there's no space for them. As much as we want this league to grow, we will grow slower if it means leaving those fans out of the mix.
How prevalent is this among the players you speak with?
It is prevalent. And with multiple that I've talked to, it's similar to what Alyssa Thomas said in that it's higher than ever. I've talked to coaches, I've talked to players, I've experienced a little bit of it myself to a very small degree, where comments are being made that are completely unrelated to basketball. Personal comments, racial comments, but for the players specifically that lay it all out there on the line to have to deal with this, and the players that have to go out there, they challenge themselves physically, mentally, and emotionally to play at their best every single night. They shouldn't have to deal with this. And a lot of them have told me that it's more than they have ever experienced. And it's hard. It's hard to go out there and be your best and do your best and represent inclusivity and represent being competitive and then deal with people tearing you down for who you are off the court and for the color of your skin. There's no place for it.
I think it's an undeniable fact that we've had multiple episodes where we called this stuff out on this show, like so much that it felt difficult at times, like difficult in the sense that like it felt like racism and homophobia and this misogyny was dominating our episode. Like we were having to like do really happy segments just because so much of it was dominated by this ugly discourse and this ugly behavior. And we've touched on the lack of strong statements from the league, from the Fever, from even Caitlin herself. I guess Maddie, right off the jump, kind of just give me your thoughts on Alyssa Thomas's statement.
Well, first, I just want to start off by saying that Alyssa Thomas is one of the quietest players in the WNBA. So for her to make a statement like this, um, really speaks volumes to me. And so honestly, my first thought is just disgust and anger that a player like Alyssa Thomas, obviously this should not happen to anybody regardless. But a player like Alyssa Thomas who's already had to experience so much. I mean, she has dealt with so much in her career between injuries, playing overseas, the lack of facilities at Connecticut. This same player, an MVP caliber player who has set records in this league, just had a triple double in the playoffs, who had to share a practice gym with a 2-year-old's birthday party earlier this week. And on top of all of that, now her and her teammates and her fiance are being inundated with bigotry and vitriol at every turn, and at their workplace. It's absolutely unacceptable, like she said, and we have to continue to call it out, even when it's tiring, because otherwise these situations just continually get swept under the rug, and we start repeating these conversations over and over again for months and months and months. And then we're sitting here and saying, wow, we really could have maybe prevented some of this if we had simply addressed this when it first started happening months ago. So I think, it's like too little, too late. But at the same time, it's like this has to be a wake up call to people hearing from Alyssa Thomas herself that in her entire career, she has never experienced anything to this degree, that this is in fact different and it's unacceptable and it has to stop. And like Andrea said, there's no space for it. This league will grow slower if it means leaving those fans behind. Um, there's no space for it, period. End of discussion. That's it.
And this kind of feels like the first instance where multiple players are starting to speak out and kind of affirm the place where players like Dejanay and Kennedy have been coming from all season. Specifically, Alyssa called directly on Indiana fans for their behavior and insisted on the team taking action. I don't think you and I have any disagreements on where this behavior is coming from, but the league taking this long to address it it's almost comical. It's not funny, haha funny. It's funny weird. Like that's the kind of comical this is. We've questioned Kathy's leadership of this league multiple times. We've both come to the conclusion that she is unfit to be in the position that she's in at the crossroads that the league is sitting at. Given all of that, how on earth does this league still fall this short? How, Maddie, are we missing the mark so poorly handling these fans?
I honestly have no idea. It's embarrassing, especially the timing. Releasing the fact that the WNBA had the audacity to release that statement right after the Fever are eliminated from the playoffs. It was like 10 at night. I don't even know. I mean, it's comical. Like you said, it's ridiculous. There's nothing else I can even really say about it. It's one of those things where you want to rip your hair out because you almost can't believe how blatantly obviously shitty they are being. Like it's like they're wearing a giant blinking sign that says we don't give a shit. We do not give a shit about our we do not give a shit about our employees, our players. We do not care at all what happens to them, how they feel, their mental health. We don't give a shit. That's what that statement said to me. Like, honestly. At that point, in that moment, like, be for real.
Yeah, I mean, I think about all of the comments and kind of touching back on how she said that there needs to be action. Like someone needs to take action. I'm kind of at the point where I feel like if the league is gonna take this seriously and show people that they're for real about this, they need to treat it similarly to how this stuff is handled in like European football. Like there needs to be a concerted effort to push messaging. You know, the whole league can push it, but the Fever specifically need to push messaging that this behavior is not going to be tolerated. If you go to a game, like you hear it, if you show up like 30 minutes before the game, you hear a PA announcement, and you even hear it at like college games. Like it's a long monologue about like unsporting behavior is not tolerated, and you can be removed from the arena by security staff. Like this league has to start taking tangible action on these fans. You need to ban fans who are using like who are doing, committing, using language, like committing discriminatory attacks on players, whether it's in person or online. Like you need to hold fans out of games if you can't contain it. You can make them forfeit. You can stop games. If you watch men's soccer, like international men's soccer, US and Mexico had a problem with the Mexican fans doing a homophobic chant, and they started stopping games and then just ending them if it was continuing, and it's gotten a little bit better since. We haven't seen a game stopped because of this chant. So all I know is that there needs to be some sort of tangible threat. I realize that policing online behavior is not, you can't do that fully. It's hard. A lot of us have to fight that battle ourselves. But there needs to be a tangible threat from teams that like counters this bullshit. So in Andrea's monologue, she made a great point. You kind of mentioned it, Maddie, but she said, as much as we want this league to grow, we will grow slower if it means leaving those fans out of the mix. Maddie, given a fan waltzed into Mohegan Sun Arena in a shirt in big bold letters. If you didn't see the photo, huge bold letters on a shirt that said "ban nails," and this lady was wearing a comically dramatized set of fake acrylic nails. They weren't even like real acrylic nails; they were like paper. This happened 2 days ago on Wednesday, a road game, by the way, for the Indiana Fever. Do you trust the league to make good on Andrea's point? Or do you think Kathy's comments on CNBC a few weeks ago are more indicative of the league's plans or lack thereof to tackle fan behavior?
Do I trust the league? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Not at all. I think it says everything. Mind you, this woman also had a fake black eye as well. It like just like I thought it was just bad eyeshadow, but people later informed me no, it was actually it was bad eyeshadow, but it was intended to be a fake black eye
Not
as
the
well.
stray.
So no, I don't trust this fucking league for a minute. I mean, what happened to DeJournette, especially given what the players in this league did and what they stood for when it comes to Black Lives Matter, there should have been action taken months ago. That is the bottom line. And the fact that they didn't, I mean, because DeJournette posted about this publicly. This is not like, this is what people are forgetting about this also, is like, these are not things that are happening in the shadows of Twitter. This is not like randos like me that are seeing these tweets and this is like coming from this. No, these are the players that are speaking out about this shit. DeJournette posted publicly on her platform, and don't even come to me about, oh, well, how was the league supposed to know she tweeted about it? Because the investigations have come from tweets before. So again, don't even start with that. The players have been telling you from their own mouths what has been happening, and you've sat silent until now. And you decided at that moment, once basically the main threat, the main people that are doing it, were already going to be gone for the rest of the season. Then you were like, hey, just a heads up to all of you guys who were just doing all that racist stuff. Just so you guys know, we don't do that here. Oh, well, thanks. Like, I mean, right after all the racists left. Like, are you fucking serious? Like, what? It's just a joke. I mean, so I hope I'm wrong. I hope, sincerely, I hope, because at the end of the day, all I care about is the players being protected. So I hope I'm wrong. I hope they're taking it seriously. I hope that's what's happening, but I have zero faith that that's what's happening, especially given what the WNBA or the WNBPA statement was. Like, it doesn't imply to me that the league has done much on this topic.
Yeah, I have zero. That's the amount of trust that I have in league leadership to take care of the fans or the players. Zero, none, and that's a shame. Like, it's a shame because in the same way that these new fans, quote unquote new fans, have disrespected all the work that the vets and the players that put into this league to get it to where it is now. The league is disrespecting the fans who bought tickets, before it was cool, before the rookies came and saved the league. Like, these fans have cultivated these diverse and welcoming environments, and you're already heading in a bad direction. You have franchises that are pricing fans out in some markets, but now you're like almost emboldening these new fans who, like, they already mimic the rhetoric, like this unfounded rhetoric that, like, the league loses so much money, they lose $50 million a year, and they'll die without Caitlyn, you'll die without me watching. Like, you are emboldening these people. So obviously the league has a role in all of this. But you and I both know that the media has capitalized on the sensationalism that the league generates, especially when it comes to Caitlin Clark. Unfortunately, that media bias took center stage this week. I'm sure none of you missed it, but USA Today's Christine Brennan, a known enemy of the state, by the way, confronted Connecticut's Dejanay Carrington with a question about whether or not she intentionally hit Caitlin Clark in the face. Apparently didn't like Dejanay's first answer, which was a completely normal no. Like, I'm not trying to whack anyone in the face. Like, I'm not that type of player. Wasn't pleased with that response, and then pressed further and pretty much just insinuated that her and Marina Mabry were laughing about the fact that Caitlin Clark got hit in the eye. Maddie, this feels like the perfect opportunity for one of your good old-fashioned soapboxes, because the media has largely operated unchecked this season, completely unchecked, and especially unchecked when it comes to sensationalizing these, like, seemingly normal moments in basketball games that happens all the time, and this situation in particular feels wildly over the line.
Yeah, well, Christine Brennan showed her ass in two different ways. The first way was by showing that basketball clearly is not her native beat. And I know that it's not her native beat because, she's like a storied football reporter, and she covered the Olympics and she covered figure skating. So basketball is not her thing. And you know that basketball is not her thing because she did not recognize what any basketball fan could see was the famous Carmelo Anthony 3 to the dome celebration. That is what Marina and Dejanay were doing. Mind you, this was 3 quarters later. I have never seen, there's never been a sport that I've ever watched where I saw somebody intentionally hit somebody like in that context, and then 3 quarters later, an hour plus later, they're joking with somebody else about it. Like, I don't think have you guys ever played sports? Like, I didn't even play like, I am just so confused on where this shit comes from. So the fact that she even put those things together, which, hint, she didn't. I'm pretty sure she saw Ken Swift tweet a conspiracy theory about it. I
Not a
feel
great
like she's
source.
about to start peddling ivermectin. I am so confused. Now, the second area that she's really showing her ass is they come out with this statement afterwards talking about journalistic integrity and asking the hard questions as if this woman is not writing an unauthorized biography of Caitlin Clark. Unauthorized, mind you. This is not Caitlin Clark hired this lady to hire her to follow her around and, document her career or whatever. This lady is a rando and she is obsessed with Caitlin Clark. I'm sorry, she's obsessed with Caitlin Clark to the point where people have been talking about this other girl's account who's like stalking Evan Peters. I don't know if you've seen this, but
What?
yeah, this is like a whole side. Sorry to go on this side tangent. But there was this like whole thread because this woman, anyways, she posted like, oh, I saw Evan Peters in the airport, and like it seems like, oh, just like a normal thing, like, and then you look at her account and it's like she's been seeing Evan Peters at the airport, like a lot at different airports, like around the country kind of vibe. Anyways, that's the energy that she's giving. I literally was going through her profile and she is just like following Caitlin Clark around the country. All of her posts are about Caitlin Clark. She's not following the fever. She's literally just following Caitlin Clark. Here's the other thing. I know she knows how to be unbiased in situations because I was also reading, and for the most part, she got the Jordan Childs medal situation right. Like, I was literally reading, she was right on that shit. And she was like, absolutely not. That's not okay. And you want to know why I think that is? Probably because the Olympics was her fucking beat. She knows about the Olympics. So she was on that shit. She doesn't know shit about fucking basketball. She got obsessed with Caitlin Clark. She was like, white girl. And you know what I think it is? This is where I'm going to go tinfoil hat club on you. I was looking earlier on her Wikipedia page and she's from Ohio. And I don't know, but something in me just tells me she's just projecting her small town Ohio story onto Caitlin Clark. And she's like, oh my God, like another white girl who grew up, whatever. I think that's, and so she's like she's having some kind of midlife crisis and she's deciding to follow Caitlin Clark around. This Caitlin Clark obsession has clouded her judgment to the point that now she has been caught basically being racist in 4K. Like this line of questioning and interrogation of Dejanay is so fucking absurd. Like so absurd. The fact that the first question is offensive enough. The fact that she asks her if it was intentional is offensive enough. Because mind you, Caitlin also hit Dejanay later in the game and knocked her contact out of her eye. Nobody's talking about that. Not a word about that. Not a question about that. None of it. But Caitlin is the whole story, right? So whatever. She asked the first question. After Dejanay says no, it was not on purpose. For her to then ask, okay, since it wasn't on purpose, 3 quarters later, were you and Marina laughing about you hitting her? Bitch, why would she be laughing if she didn't do it on purpose? Like, that is what pisses me off so bad about that. You could tell very obviously that she had decided what she was going to ask Dejanay before she even did it. And I don't know shit. I didn't go to journalism school. I'll tell you that. But I'm pretty sure conversationalism 101 is if you ask somebody a question and they answer that question, you don't just ask them a follow-up question that was already answered by question number 1. Asked and answered, Your Honor. Like, I mean, it's just garbage. The whole thing is garbage. It's bullshit. The line of questioning was bullshit, and Christine knows better, and I know she knows better, and I hope she's ashamed.
I honestly smirked the same way that Dejanay did when I saw the video interview. Like, especially because in said video, that first response, which was a perfectly good response to the question, was Dejanay said, I'm not even that type of player, which is unquestionably true. Like, aside from like squabbling with Marina Mabry, like the new bestie, we've never seen Dejanay involved in like anything. Like, and this is exactly what we're talking about when it comes to the sensationalism of the sport. Because what I can tell you is that this league does have a real agitator. There is somebody in this league that instigates, and her name is Sophie Cunningham. She's done things to endanger players multiple times. She's yanked down stars like Asia Wilson, and everybody remembers Kalia Copper in the finals in 2021. Like, she goes down low, she like yanks people down, like she starts dust up, she's shoving people and yapping. Like, but unless if you actively watch the WNBA closely, you would never know. Like, you would never know that Sophie Cunningham was like involved in, I could count like 3 or 4 dust ups this year alone that she's been involved in. But and if you ask a W fan, by the way, like you could probably ask any person who's watched the WNBA longer than this year, and they'll tell you she's probably at the front of the line to make a dirty play. Of like most players in this league, she's probably towards or at the front of the line. I can't help but look at the common denominators, which is she is a blonde, she is a white woman, she is a conservative. We all know this. And she largely agitates black women. So my question is, where are the articles? Where are the pointed questions? Where is this hard truth journalism that insinuates Sophie Cunningham as a dirty player? Why aren't there think pieces and multiple pointed interviews where journalists are taking over the conversation? Where is this? Where is this for that? So, Maddie, that leads me to the question of how do teams and players protect themselves from this? Because it's pretty obvious targeting. Like, it just is what it is. It's pretty obvious who it's being targeted at. And I don't know what solutions the league will offer, if any. So what do the teams and players do?
I don't know, honestly, but I was talking to a mutual who was used to work in social media in the music industry, and she was saying that she was shocked to learn that a lot of these athletes, or most of these athletes, fully run their own socials. So I think teams at a bare minimum should be helping players with social media managers who can at least filter out threatening comments and just like reduce what they are seeing. And I also think pulling credentials from journalists who ask questions like that or show obvious bias. I don't know all the rules of how these media scrums work, but I feel like at some point accountability has to be taken. And these athletes simply cannot be subjected to questions like this. Like, it's not appropriate. And I also don't want to hear shit about what happens in other leagues or it's not okay in men's sports either. Period. It's not okay for anybody to be dehumanized at their job. Period. Full stop. That's it. I don't know what to tell you. So, whatever is going to protect players from being dehumanized at their jobs, that's what I'm for. And the league needs to do it quickly. Like,
Yeah,
it's beyond time.
I mean, you can even look at college football, and Deion Sanders at Colorado just had a situation this going into the season with a journalist from Denver that kind of always had beef with. It's obviously not for the same reasons the W is dealing with. It's more of just personal reasons, but revoked the credential. Like, didn't want the guy there. It was clearly agitating, and it wasn't helpful to the situation. So they just pulled the credential. So I feel like at this point, like, I don't know who's in charge of it, whether it's teams or whether you're credentialed through the league, but whoever's in charge of that, we got to start thinking about pulling credentials, because we've got too many weird situations going on with journalists. There was already the incident before the season with the weird guy who was weird about Caitlin Clark and the heart, and now you've got this lady, and it's just, you have Outkick, like these right-wing media places there. We just need to, I don't know who's in charge of it, but we need to just shore it up a little bit. I'm sure we'll get into this a little bit more on our next episode as well, but I think we're finally coming up on a breaking point between players in the league. I mean, you have Alyssa Thomas, and you have Aaliyah Boston and Brittany Griner. You have a lot of players right now who are speaking out, on top of these scathing statements that we're getting from like the Players Association. Although I do have to say, gotta mention this because you have to. It is quite hilarious that USA Today put out a statement in defense of their journalist Christine Brennan, It was basically just all of the slop about she's a veteran and been in the industry and she knows what she's doing. It was just it doesn't matter how long you've been doing something if you suck at it. You got the job and you're doing it, but you suck at it. But the executive editor who made this statement from USA Today, guess where she's an alum? Iowa. She went to Iowa, the University of Iowa. You cannot script it better than that. And I'll say this before we move on. At this point, let's just drop the act. Let's stop pretending that we're doing hard-hitting journalism, and like just stop acting like you're unbiased. Like these journalists, like Christine Brennan, they move in the same motion as those right-wing sites that I was just talking about, like Outkick and Fox News. Like they frame Caitlyn as a victim any chance they get. Even ESPN frames Caitlyn as a victim any chance they get. And I get it. I mean, Maddie just explained the obsession of it. Just like a white woman is a fan of another white woman because she's a white woman in a sport dominated by black players. And she's backed up by a boss that has the same convictions, the same connections. So let's just stop the pretending act. Let's stop pretending that we care about everyone and the players and the truth. You care about your agenda and you care about clicks. That's it. These right-wing media sites, they stand on that business that all they give a shit about is clicks and that's all they go after. So stop pretending like you're any better than that because that's what you're doing. You might be USA Today, but guess what? You have to sell papers and you have to sell clicks. That's it. All right, so let's get back to the basketball. We still have a lot of basketball ahead of us. We have a pair of semifinal series to preview. And we might be looking at possibly the most well-matched sets of teams that we've had in quite a while in the semifinals. So let's get it started with the Connecticut Sun and the Minnesota Lynx. Maddie, we mentioned last episode, the Lynx dominated the top 5 all season long, but they did have one thorn in their side, and that thorn was the Connecticut Sun. So given the trouble that we saw Phoenix give Minnesota in that opening round series, are the Suns set up to not only win a couple of games, but can they win this 5-game series?
Well, first of all 3 regular season matchups were decided by a combined 8 points. So I definitely think this series is going to be a banger. These are the 2 best defensive teams in the league, 2 very gritty teams. So I think there's going to be a lot of banging in the post. I think ultimately, in a weird way, this could kind of come down to, can the Iowa girl, Bridget Carlton, or the girl from Jersey shoot the lights out? Which one is going to shoot the lights out from 3? Both of them have had their moments this season. But I definitely think, I just see a lot of physicality, I feel like a lot of players are going to be on the floor in this series. Like there's going to be a lot of maybe play stoppages for, just players on the ground being tended to in different ways.
And that's saying a lot because Tip Hayes is still in the playoffs, so that's saying a lot that there's going to be other bodies on the floor more often. I know that the media and social media itself is probably going to be all over that other series, the finals rematch between New York and Vegas, but I kind of think this series may have some of the best basketball we've watched all season. We had some banger games this year, but I think this has the potential to be one of the best series or games of basketball we've watched this season because like between Fee's incredible start in the first round, the length and their depth, the bigs in Connecticut and how dominant they are. You've got the added scoring from Marina Mabry. The series is like an all-timer vibe to me. I know there's storylines in the other series, but like just given where we are right now in this moment in the context of this playoffs in this series, this might be some of the best basketball we've seen. I think I still like Minnesota's depth in general, but Connecticut, they've improved. They played most of their games earlier in the season. They've only played one, with their rosters as is. And at one point, Connecticut made Nafisa look like a human. She had 9 points in their meeting in July. So the Sun beat Minnesota on the road. Navis Collier. We've talked about it. We've said it. You've probably seen it. Seems to be on what's looking like an all-time MVP snub run. Marina Mabry has made more threes by herself on average than the Sun averaged as a team this year. The Lynx are like 16-2 in their last 18. There is so much to factor into this series, but Maddie, I have to put you on the spot for a prediction. Who do you think has the momentum to push through and win this series?
I am going to say this is tough. This is tough, but I'm going to say Connecticut in 5. It's going to be a tough series. Fee is going to eat and may set some records in the process for all we know. But I think the Suns' playoff experience as a group and really the gravity. I mean, we have to remember once again that free agency looming. This may be it for this Sun core group. Like the Lynx are playing with house money. Nobody really expected them to be here, but the Sun need to make the finals here. They need to win. They need to make the finals and win. So I think that's ultimately what gives the edge for me. And I do think coming off the Indiana series, maybe there's a little bit of fuel from that. And then also, I saw pretty much everybody at ESPN had the Lynx in 4 or 5. So there may be some bulletin board material out there. They're kind of getting snubbed in awards other than Dijonay. So I don't know. I'm feeling good about Connecticut, even though they don't, the Lynx have been looking great, but
If you would have pressed me for a prediction a couple of weeks ago, I mean, even on the first day of the playoffs, I probably would have told you Minnesota in 3, Minnesota in 4. At this point, frankly, I do not see how the series doesn't go to 5 games. Someone's going to have to get hurt. Something major is going to have to happen for me to be convinced that this is not a 5-game series. I like Connecticut's toughness. I like their defense. Even before they acquired Marina Mabry, they were beating Minnesota. So obviously the tools are there for them to win this series. Honestly, I'm right there with you. I think I have to take the Sun in 5. It feels like a completely crazy prediction to make, given he is embarrassing folks left and right. But obviously, it's 2 very well matched up teams. I think the Lynx took a little bit of an advantage of a cold month from the Sun when they beat them. The Bigs were kind of slow in terms of scoring in September, and they still only survived by 2. So when you look at the box scores and you see that Pizza Collier has been taken away and Alana Smith has been minimized and Bridget Carlton has over the course of these matchups. I mean, they've even drug bad games out of Courtney Williams. Like, that's somebody who's a walking jumper. In the same way that the Lynx have owned Liberty, I kind of feel like the Sun have had Minnesota kind of in the same position. It feels gross. It feels really tough to make. You said it, but that's my pick. I think that's my official pick. And all I know is that it's going to be a hell of a series. You said it. The series in total in the regular season was decided by like 8 points. So I would just prepare as a fan for every game to be a nail biter, and I'm glad it's not my series. On the other side of the bracket, we do have my series, the Media Darling series, as we said, the rematch of last year's finals between the Liberty and the Aces. As compelling as the other semifinal is going to be, I think it would be pretty silly not to expect fireworks in this one, just given the rivalry and the history starting to develop between the two. All right. New York owned the regular season series. They swept the Aces 3-0. The Asialess Aces shockingly threw their best punch a few weeks ago when they played at Barclays. They stormed back in the 4th quarter. We had some PTSD from game 4 going on. Ultimately, the Aces fell short by 4. But now that it kind of feels like both teams are starting to operate close to their best, Maddie, what factors to you stand out that will kind of help decide how this series goes?
well, the first thing that came to my mind was refs. If Guido is there, the Aces are screwed. I'm sorry.
I love that that's stuck.
If he is there, we are hosed. The Aces and Liberty, actually, I was looking this up earlier, averaged pretty similar free throw numbers in the regular season. But as you mentioned earlier, the Liberty had almost 20 more free throws than the Aces in their 3 regular season matchups. So it was also a 22-10 free throw attempt discrepancy in their most recent game in Barclays. So Becky Hammond also had some words to say about that. So I will be watching that aspect closely. I think that has a potential to be a big impact here. My second factor that I'm looking at is which white girl shooters get hot. We've got KP, Sabrina Ionescu, Leonie Fibich, Flute potentially. There's a lot of white girl shooters around. Which one of them, if any, are going to be hot? I imagine at least one of them are going to be hot. So that's something that I'm looking at. And the other aspect that I think I'm looking at is probably clutch time. So I looked up earlier, the Liberty were actually 13-3 in clutch games this season, and the Aces were 9-8. So on the other hand, as I said earlier, the Aces are in a different mode. So maybe that even really doesn't matter at all. You never know, because clearly, that the one game against Seattle was kind of close and then it wasn't. So I guess those are kind of the main factors that I'm thinking about. Because I feel like, again, Asia, it's like Asia and Stewie, you know what you're gonna get. You know what you're gonna get from Stuja every time. The two of them are gonna go at it, whatever. So some of those things kind of cancel out. And then, Tip Hayes, I feel like also could be a real X factor here because again, if she's giving that production and the bench isn't giving anything else, and Alicia Clark is pitching in with a 3 or 2, like now we're getting somewhere. Now things are getting interesting.
I think there's 2 factors straight up that the Aces need to control to have a shot in the series. I think it's team defense and it's your bench production. I they say this a lot, and I feel like college basketball that this team has to keep this team under this number of points, like if they want to have a shot. Like I feel like the Aces can't allow the Liberty over 80 points. Like if the Liberty cross 80, you're not gonna win. Like you're not gonna beat New York in a scoring contest with some of the shooters that they've got. I think if you hold the Liberty in the 70s, preferably 75 or under, I think your chances go way up because you haven't played New York once with a fully healthy team. So like that's certainly a factor. And so if you're full strength, you really need to focus on team defense, bench production. Those are the 2 things. I think that in terms of that bench production, I think it's kind of vital to get double-digit production from both Alicia Clark and Tip Hayes. Now, I think you could consider it like a combination. So like they just need to go for like 20 or more. So that can kind of come in a lot of different ways. It can come in both of them maybe putting up 12. It can come in Tip Hayes putting up 20 and Alicia Clark 2. There's a lot of different ways it can happen, but I think we're going to need to get a decent amount of points from them. And you need shot makers to make shots when it counts. I think you need to get 12, 16, 20. Like you just got to get something out of them because with Kelsey Plum and Jackie Young kind of skidding a little bit, like you want somebody to be able to kind of pitch in that little bit extra. Shockingly enough, Vegas has kind of kept Sabrina and Jonquel under control. I think Jonquel went off in the first game a little bit, but I think if you can add in, a difficult series for either or both of them, your chances just get a little bit better. So there's little things that I feel like the Aces are in control of that they can kind of do to better their chances. Because listen, they're the back-to-back champs. Maddie said it. Like she believes this team could win a championship at all. So just having that pedigree is good. But I think the more things you get right, the better your chances are going to get to truly pull the series off. So it's time once again, Maddie, to go on the spot, get on the hot seat, go on the record, This last series was already gross. It felt gross for me. I'm sure it was hard for you to pick, but you've got to do it. Do you have the Las Vegas Aces flipping the script on New York, or do you think the Liberty can brush off the pressure and push to their second straight final?
Okay. I'm going to harken back to my Kansas City Chiefs prediction. I think this is just Bills Chiefs divisional rematch. Everyone's saying, "Oh my god, I can't believe it's like crazy that we're getting New York and Las Vegas in the semifinals. Feels like it should be a fight. It's like the finals rematch." Bills Chiefs divisional rematch. That should be the AFC Championship. Mhm. And unfortunately, deep in my heart, I feel like the Liberty are about to have another wide right moment. I feel like the Aces are rolling right now. They have something to prove against New York. New York's had their number all season. They aren't going to be intimidated by Barclays because we literally just saw them win a championship on their floor. So I think it's going to be a dogfight. We might get the first double overtime game 5 in WNBA history, but I'm going to say Aces in 5. Oh God, I really hope I don't jinx them.
Well, maybe we can.
I'm knocking
depending
on
how
all
the
the wood.
series starts, we'll
I'm
have
knocking
you
on
do a
wood.
reverse.
I may
jinx.
adjust my prediction as time goes on.
Right.
This is not a locked in. This is my prediction at this moment in time is Aces in 5. Asia Wilson, baby.
What?
Sid Colson is gonna let me this is my final prediction. Sid Colson is gonna hit the season clinching dagger.
If I would love that, because like I said, if somebody, Kelsey Plum's out here throwing up, she's going out and eating sushi while she's throwing up. Like, if there's gonna be this silliness going on with the Aces guard, somebody's got to come out and hit a clutch dagger. So if it's Sid Colson, by God, it has to be Sid Colson. Like I said earlier, I really do think the pressure is squarely on New York. I see it in their fans. They see it in how they're moving on social media. You know, they're the ones they're saying, "Oh, the pressure is definitely on Vegas to three-peat. Like, it's definitely on them." Like, I just don't see that storyline having an effect on a team that's lived under pressure. You know, not only in last year to repeat, but this season they've been under pressure for various reasons and various things. So I really do think New York carries the burden of being the clear cut best team in the league. They're the franchise that's still looking for their first final win. That being said, I have the Liberty in 5. I think it's going to be 5 horrific, painstaking, heart palpitating matchups that probably are going to take years off my life. It just feels like a meeting between Goliath starting lineups, but I think New York has the advantage right now. And Sabrina Ionescu is just having a little bit better, you could say a lot better of a season than she's had in the past. And you have Leonie Ibic coming out of nowhere and just really making a huge impact, double-digit scoring, if not even touching the 20s on some nights. I think they have the stronger tools to win it. I do agree that the Aces are rolling and the Aces are much hotter than the Liberty, so the Liberty are certainly not unbeatable in any sense. I think the Aces can win this series, but I think similarly to what Atlanta needed to have a shot against New York, I think Vegas is going to have to make a combination of factors go their way on top of, potentially having to deal with the officials, because if Isaac Barnett is on a game, the Aces will not win. You can put your money on that when you find out who the officiating crew is and see how it goes for you. But either way, I'm definitely prepared for said heart palpitations. I'm probably going to get the warnings on my Apple Watch, but like I said, I think the libs will just ultimately be better in the end. So we will see. We've taken a line in the sand. We've drawn a line in the sand. We've each taken a side. So we'll see who it falls for. That pretty much wraps up the show for today, but I think we'd be remiss if we dipped out of here without discussing some shocking news that dropped on Thursday, and that was the firing of Chicago Sky head coach Teresa Weatherspoon after only a single season at the helm of the team. It was
Boo.
8 months officially, I believe, February to October that she was with the team, or September. It was just a weird rumor. I saw it floating around and thought, like, somebody, this is just the angel stands that are mad. It's just a weird rumor that she's being fired. But it was made official on Thursday, and it was followed by, a pretty heartbreaking goodbye tweet from Angel Reese, which was really difficult to read, especially because she was already tweeting earlier in the day about, the racism and things she's experienced this season. Maddie, I just don't see the vision here from the Chicago Sky organization on this. Like, do you see a vision?
No, I don't see a vision at all. We were literally discussing before the show. I don't think I've ever seen the timeline more united in confusion and anger about a topic than Teaspoon being fired. Literally everybody on all sides, all fans were literally just like, what the hell? For what? What you did what now? I think we also have to consider when she was hired was October. At that time, their franchise star, former finals MVP, Kalia Copper, was still there and had not requested a trade yet. Only after the Sky failed to acquire anyone in free agency and NECA and Skylar both went to Seattle did Ka decide to take her talents to Phoenix. So Spoon was already unfairly thrust into a rebuild, a total rebuild that she wasn't prepared for. She took on two rookie sensations, led them to great seasons, despite the fact that both of them had injuries. They also had injuries to other key contributors, like Elizabeth Williams was out for the majority of the season with a torn meniscus. Helped Kennedy Carter, who was literally out of the league last year, reach her potential, was thriving off the court. They had a great relationship. That team was ready to run through a wall for her. And with a young team, that means something. Like they were, until the final day of the season, they were fighting for her. I was ready to run through a wall for her. I'm not even a Sky fan. So I don't understand. I'm clueless. It makes no sense to me. I am shocked, disgusted, and furious. That's all I have. I'm almost speechless. Like I'm still it's
I honestly, it's kind of stunning when you consider that the fact that this franchise was basically left in ruins by James Wade. Like, it's ruins is a fair assessment of what Chicago was and still is. You had a first year coach, like you said, getting incredible mileage out of a team that looked outside of your rookies very average on paper. We did not know what we were going to get from Kennedy Carter or Lindsey Allen or Elizabeth Williams. We did not know what was coming, and you got great mileage despite those injuries and despite the racial tensions and despite all the shit that they went through. I saw on Twitter a lot of fans, Sky fans in particular, were quick to kind of dig into what looks like a pattern of players and staff kind of leaving this franchise going back to like the 2000s, like earlier in the 2000s. You've seen so many stars like Sylvia Fowles and Elena Deladon, Julia Copper, Candace Park, just people leaving this franchise in droves. So, although I think the answer is pretty clear, what's your take? What exactly is your take on this sort of like mass mutiny that's kind of taken place over the tenure of their existence, and is it standing out to you as the obvious issue?
yeah, I think at this point it has to be an organizational issue because they also just axed the best WNBA Twitter admin in the game. So it seems like that franchise is just dedicated to eradicating talent. They acquire it and then they either scare it off or fire it or do whatever else to make sure that it never returns. So I am just speechless. Like once again, do you know how bad you have to be a bad owner in the city of Chicago? Like right now in a town where the White Sox exist and the Bears exist? Like, come on. So I don't know. Things do not look good. Former player Deb Peters was also tweeting that the Sky owner is a real estate developer, and allegedly their new facility that they just announced is not going to actually be a new facility, but a repurposed facility of some kind. Needless to say, things do not look good. I cannot get that Angel Reese double cake out of my head. I never will. I don't know what's going on over there, but it sounds like something Kathy and her Deloitte blazer should be investigating swiftly. Something is going on over there.
I'm just failing to make sense of it. Like I have this like uneasy feeling, I think, in my gut about this franchise in general, and I think it runs deeper than just ticket hikes and player mismanagement. But instead of speculating about it, I will say that in an era where more teams are going to come into this league and established powers like Vegas and Seattle and Phoenix, like all these teams are investing in facilities, they're investing in their programs. This is not the time to be frugal. Like, you're going to get run out of this league competitively, and you will not attract free agents. Like, damn a salary cap. Like, people just are not going to want to come to your franchise. And truth be told, these franchises need to be doing everything that they can to be a destination. And what the Chicago Sky have done with this firing is a concerning step in the opposite direction of that destination. So we will wrap it up on that note. We have kept you guys here for almost 2 hours. It gets longer and longer every time. I hope you enjoy it. I'm sure it won't be the last time we talk about that situation in Chicago. We will be back, of course, probably next week in the middle of the matchups. Maybe one will be wrapped up by then, maybe not. Maybe it'll go all the way to 5. Who knows? But as always, we will catch you on Twitter. We're at Flagrant Femmes. Smash that follow button if you haven't already. We will see you next week. And remember, mess with the femmes, catch a flagrant.
Going up.